right, guys, I want to introduce my friend Tim Chaffey. Let him join us here. Some of you probably actually already know him because he's been somebody that I've done several things with, introduced to him really years ago, but it was really got to know him even better when he did a sermon or a little, a chapel message basically for the Answers in Genesis staff on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And it was a session called A Hole in Our Gospel. What is it that many people miss when they present the gospel of Jesus Christ to people? And he talked about the fact that many people talk about the death of the cross. They talk about the gruesomeness of that. They don't talk about the resurrection very much. And I went, wow. And he said, what is the whole gospel? If we're going to have a whole gospel presentation, what is it? And it fascinated me. That prompted me to give him a call. And we ended up doing the series Risen Without a Doubt. That is, to me, a great study on the resurrection of Christ. It covers everything. But that was really us getting to know each other even better. Tim, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing pretty good, but now that you just brought up the resurrection, I don't think I can refocus on the Nephilim because you started talking about my favorite subject, and I'm just going to have to go off on that for a while.
That is your favorite, I know. Okay, so this is interesting. You have been studying the idea of Nephilim, the giants, the sons of God, daughters of men, but really kind of with the giants it started off with because you're a giant, man. You are a giant. I mean, Ken Ham calls you Nephilim.
Yes, he does.
So tell us about your background in this and why you got involved in it.
Yeah, so I was about 6'9". I'm a little older now. I'm probably 6'8", probably shrunk a little bit. Plus I lost my hair, so I'm not as tall as I used to be. But I've been called giant so many times in my life, or Nephilim so many times, which that's actually improper in a couple of ways. One, if you knew what you're calling me, that's pretty rude. Number two, that's a plural term, so it's like calling me giants. No, I'm just singular would be Nephil, so get it right.
Okay, giant, go ahead.
But so I've been fascinated with the topic for a long time, and I've done a few, very short studies on it to do a couple of teaching classes, things like that, back in the mid 2000s. And then when I was working on my THM, my Master of Theology degree, I needed to do a thesis, and I thought, this would be a really fun topic to dive into. I wonder if anybody else has really done something on it. And I was really shocked that there were hardly any dissertations on the topic, PhD dissertations, hardly any THM thesis that I could find. In fact, I only found one, and it really didn't cover what I was planning on covering. And I thought, well, this looks like it'd be a good topic. And I ended up writing about 45,000 words. So when I put it in a booklet form, it was like 135 pages or something, 145. And ever since then, there were so many other topics I wanted to get into and that I just couldn't in an academic paper. And I also wanted to make it available for, lay level, because an academic paper, half of the whole thing is footnotes, and that's pretty boring to read. And most people don't like that. It doesn't have pictures. So Eric, you probably couldn't handle it.
I would not have read it. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Like Fallen I think it has 4 pictures. I thought of you when I was putting those in there.
I'm thumbing through. I'm trying to find them.
Yeah, they're all in most of them are like around chapter 22, 23, somewhere in that area. So right about where you're at now, there should be a few of them.
Yeah, I'm looking. Hey, I enjoyed. This is a fascinating book without the pictures. I got to be honest. This is First of all, you did a great job of writing the book. The way it's written is very clear, very articulate. Spying and lying, chapter. Yeah, I'm all right. Now I'm at chapter 21. Okay, maybe you forgot the pictures in my special edition that you printed and had sent just to me. Maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah. So anyways, for the last 8 years, up until that came out last year, I had been rewriting, reworking, expanding it. See, there's a picture of me.
Found a picture, guys. Check it out. I found a picture in his book. Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
No, Eric, real quickly, you mentioned Ken Ham called me Nephilim. I should probably add, some of your listeners probably recognize me from Answers in Genesis. And as a ministry, AIG does not take an official position on the whole Sons of God, Genesis 6:1-4 passage. So anything I share tonight, that's going to be my own, related to this topic. It's going to be my own view. Don't think that that's representing Answers in Genesis at all, because it isn't. We don't, other than we say that what happened there is historical, but we don't get into who are the sons of God, that kind of thing. So that's not an Answers in Genesis thing. But they'll be my own views.
And can you, while you mention that and kind of your disclaimer section, I find that some people can get really, really heated about this subject. I'm not exactly sure why, other than maybe it's just, man, I have a desire to be true to the Word of God. And if you present one view over another, or you present this one over this one, you're not being true to the Word of God. And so I'm passionate about the purity of the Word of God and people understanding it correctly. But you hit that real quick, because you've actually got people that have been pretty upset with you for kind of the way you share it.
Yeah. Now,
Or not
what I
the
was
way
going to say
you
real quickly, and it'll tie into that perfectly, is one of the benefits of, at Answers in Genesis, it's a non-denominational ministry. So we have people who disagree on different topics, including this one, and I can work side by side with them. We can get along great. We can, we can do the work that we're called to do without having to fight or, split the church over things like this. And that's the way it should be. I mean, this is not part of the gospel presentation. It's not like, Paul told the Corinthians that death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ, and make sure you hold Tim's view on the Nephilim. Right? That's not part of it. But you're right. Some people do get really bent out of shape on this. As far as the reason you gave, I think that one is true of a lot of people on any topic. There's some people who don't know how to handle it when somebody disagrees with them. They just think, well, I have to be right no matter what. And they're okay with slamming somebody else, telling them that they're so stupid for believing something different, but they're never willing to take correction. But I think that's people in general, in at least some people in general. When it comes to this topic, I think there's at least two reasons why some people get really emotional. And it's usually in response to one of the views we're going to talk about, which is the fallen angel view, is they think, they think it's disgusting and it's just horrible. How could anybody possibly believe it? That's just absurd, that it's borrowing from mythology or whatever. But the second reason is they really believe that in Matthew 22:30, Jesus ruled that view out. And so if you're promoting that view, well, then you're just completely denying the words of Jesus. How dare you? And you're saying that he was wrong or he's a liar or something. And let me just say this right away. If I thought for a second that Jesus ruled that view out, that view is ruled out. Okay, but if you look closely, if you look closely, he didn't talk about that in that passage. So we'll probably get into that in a little bit.
That's awesome. Well, I am looking forward to getting into it. I just want everybody to know that as we go through this, I enjoy these webinars. We're actually keeping these webinars that we've done, even the ones that we've done in the past. So the webinar that I've done with, there it is, on the Flat Earth with Dr. Denny Faulkner, another Answers in Genesis guy, is still available. The Bad Answers webinar that I did last Monday with Chad, probably one of my favorites. Got to be honest, Tim, we got to rise up to that expectation. Okay, it was really good. And then tonight, these are all available at Creation Today, because the reason we do these is we want people to have answers. We say it all the time. Listen, if you're confused, you're going to lose. And the people around you are going to lose, but it doesn't have to be that way. You really can have answers, and you should, because someone's eternity is typically at stake, and eternity is just too long for you or for your friends or for your family to be wrong. So we really want you to have answers. And as we go through this, let's see here, as we go through this session on the Nephilim, whatever view you take, the goal of tonight is to encourage you to be a studier, a student of the Word of God, and to be a proclaimer of the gospel of Jesus Christ. No matter what view you take, I just want you to know, at the end of the day, that's the goal. Let's get out there and let's share the gospel of Jesus Christ. So excited about this, Tim. I want you to jump in and let's, unless you got any more preliminaries, I want to jump in and talk about the Nephilim here and what even that term means, where it comes from. I kind of prefaced it with Genesis 6:1-4, which doesn't use the word Nephilim, but let's jump into this and then give the background and then give the views.
Well, it does use it in the Hebrew, and many English Bibles in verse 4, like, for example, the King James will say there were giants on the earth in those days. So many other Bibles will just say the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, because that's the Hebrew word, Nephilim. So you have some translations that'll just say giants, and others will just use the Hebrew word. They just transliterate it. Sometimes because they think that we aren't quite sure of the meaning of the word, but it's pretty well established that it does mean giants. So as far as the different views, I guess when you read through the passage, before you even get to the Nephilim, you have to identify who the sons of God are. You have to identify who the daughters of men are. So in verse 1, it talks about how when men began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, then it goes on and says, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives of any that they chose. And So who are the sons of God? And there's really three major views throughout church history on that topic. And correctly identifying the sons of God is really crucial to identifying who the Nephilim are. We can define what that word means, but if the beginning of the passage, if you can't even make sense of that, then it's going to be difficult to identify who the Nephilim are, why they are there, anything like that.
All right, man. So giants on the earth, Nephilim. And I mean, because I was brought up, my dad talked about the giants and related it to the hyperbaric chamber, and it was everybody that lived bigger before the flood. And I think I've kind of changed my mind on that based on what I know now. I don't agree with that necessary interpretation of what he was talking about. But these verses in Genesis 6, 1-4, there's a lot to unpackage here. By the way, that's why you're going to want the whole book. We can't cover all this tonight. But three basic views. The first one was actually mentioned by John, the Sethite view, right?
Yep. So that's not the first one historically. That's actually the third one out of the three we're going to talk about historically. But it's from about the early 400s, from the time of Augustine until about 1900. That was the dominant view in church history by far. That was very much the leading view, but it was really the third one that came along. So with the Sethite view, it says in Genesis 5, you're given this genealogy from Adam to Seth and down all the way to Noah. And they'll say, this is the godly line, the Sethite line. And then they'll say in Genesis 4, the second half of that chapter deals with Cain's line. And we know Cain was a murderer. And then the guy at the very end of that line, his dad, Lamech, he was a polygamist, and he was vengeful, those kind of things. So he wasn't a very good guy either. That's the ungodly line. So the Sethite view says that the sons of God were Sethites, and that the daughters of men were the daughters from the line of Cain. And when they intermarried, that was a marriage between a believer and unbeliever, and that's forbidden in the Bible. Therefore, that was wrong, and it led to a lot of the problems that were on the earth with the violence that were there because people weren't being trained in the ways of God. And so that was the problem going on before the start of the problem before the flood. Maybe not the start of the problem, that's not really fair. That was one of the major problems before the flood, and that was one of the reasons for the flood. So that's the Sethite view as far as the some of the arguments for it, and defining what the view is. Do you want me to jump into the next view?
I do want these to kind of compare back and forth. So I want to be able to say, okay, here's the Sethite view. Here's what it teaches. This idea that the sons of God were a lineage of Seth and that they married daughters of men. But this is a view that would say that the daughters of men were kind of bad women, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go. I mean, I think just compare and contrast, that view, the strengths and the weaknesses of that. I think that'd be a good way.
Yeah. Well, I already gave you the strengths because that's about all there are. That it's the number one view in church history from the early 400s until about 1900. And then in Genesis 4 and 5, you do have those two lines being discussed. So you don't have to jump really far outside the context to get an idea of who they might be. But that's really about it when it comes to the arguments in favor of that position. Now, some people will use objections to the fallen angel view and say, see, that favors the Sethite view, but it really doesn't, because even if it's a good objection to the fallen angel view, it could still be an argument for a different view, such as the Cainite view, which is kind of the reverse of the Sethite view, and that's a minor view. We probably won't even get into that much. But then the royalty view, or the divine tyrants view, it has the same. I mean, there's another view that says that they were men, the sons of God were men. And so just arguing against the fallen angel view doesn't necessarily support the Sethite view. But as far as some of the weaknesses for that view, it's interesting that they say the daughters of men would be the line of Cain, because the line that mentions daughters over and over again is the Sethite line. It says Adam and Eve had sons and daughters, and it says Seth had sons and daughters. Then it goes on to Enos had sons and daughters. So it goes on and mentions how the daughters that are mentioned are continually in the Sethite line, not in Cain's line. In fact, only one daughter is mentioned at the very end of Cain's line. That's Naamah. So that doesn't fit very well. You also have to jump from, in Genesis 6:1, it says, when men began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them. Well, who are the men in that passage? It's just men in general. There's nothing there that says this is just the line of Seth multiplying on the earth. So when mankind began to multiply and daughters were born to them, Yeah, so daughters were born to the men who were multiplying on the earth. Who is that? That's daughters in general. So that's really all women on the earth. Daughters of men is a way of referring to women, and really it's benot ha-adam. So daughters of Adam is what it's saying. Daughters of men, and the same thing you can see as a general term for men in Genesis 11 when God says that he came down or to the tower to see what the sons of men, sons of Adam, had built. So it's just a general term for, in this passage, to women in general. And yet what they do is, if you look at verse 1, daughters were born to those men in general. In verse 2, then they say, well, the daughters of men, that's only the daughters in the line of Cain. Where is the justification for doing that anywhere in the text to say, let's restrict that now to just one line, when there were other lines too? I mean, Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters, so there weren't just two lines. Some of the other problems with that view is the Bible is very clear that by Noah's time that he alone is righteous in the world. So it's not like there were a whole bunch of godly people around that were all in Seth's line. If these people were so godly, why did they continually marry ungodly women over and over and over again? I mean, yeah, occasionally that does happen, but to think that all of these godly men were marrying ungodly women, and where does the Bible ever say that line was godly? It doesn't. We know that Noah was, we know that Enoch was, and that's it. So you have to make a whole bunch of assumptions to make this work, and there are just too many textual problems.
Yeah, I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, so this is the view that's been held since 400 all the way up to, I mean, even very, very recently as a majority view, even though it was the last one kind of presented.
Yep.
And you're right, it doesn't seem, and I had somebody on my Facebook page say, this is what it was a line of Seth. And they presented the ahistorical view. But yeah, it's got some issues here of, so why would they be men of renown? Why would they, if you go to the next verse?
Why are these people men of renown? And not only that, if you read the text carefully in Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, whenever the sons of God. It's telling us right there, that little word in the Hebrew is asher. A lot of Bibles will translate it as when, but if you look at Hebrew grammars, like Gesenius and some of the other ones, they'll tell you that word right there in this construct or in this passage, it should be whenever. That doesn't seem like a big deal, but just let me read it both ways. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God went into the daughters of men. It's vague. It doesn't tell you if they were already on the earth. It doesn't tell you if they were there as a result of it. But when you correctly translated this as whenever, suddenly it tells you they were on the earth because the sons of God were doing this. They were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. If they weren't that, then there's no way of knowing who the Nephilim were. That's just, the passage is just bringing some random group of people and not telling you anything else about them if they are unconnected to this passage at all. But when you translate it correctly, it tells us very clearly they're the result of these unions, and they were there before the flood and also afterward. Well, the Sethite view can't explain how they were there afterward, but there is a view that can.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, by the way, forgive me, I'm kind of having a brain freeze. Did we do a good job of just reading this passage and telling people what's, the possibility of what's going on? Maybe some of you are like, I'm confused. What's going on with this? Or do you feel like we covered that adequately?
Well, let me just maybe go back to the screen, bring up the slide that you had there.
Okay.
One point of confusion I think a lot of people have, and I think that when John was on here, I think he might have been making that little error as well. People will confuse the word Nephilim with the sons of God. They think that that's a view. Well, the Nephilim are the result of those unions. They are giants. The sons of God, there are the three different positions on that. One we've been talking about is that they were men in the Sethite line. Another view, which is that they were divine, they were kings or royals who viewed themselves as being divine. And then another one is that they were fallen angels. So those are the three that we'll be talking about tonight. So this passage, what it's saying is that it's really kicking off the whole flood narrative. And it's telling us something was going on in the world at this time that was very wicked. All three of these views agree this is something that's bad that's going on. And so you have these entities called the sons of God, whether they're angelic or human, and they were marrying these women, and the result was not good. And as a result, God tells them that man's days are only going to be 120. There's a lot of different ideas about what that means. I've got a whole chapter on it in the book. And then it starts talking about the Nephilim being on the earth, and they were the mighty men of antiquity, men of renown. So, yeah, only about 100 words, but there are thousands of questions that come out of that.
No kidding. I mean, already in the chat, Lewis is like, hey, why does it, when it says, Yahweh said, my spirit will not remain with man indefinitely, in that he is flesh, is this, why, if this is referring to angelic beings, why would he say that?
So here's, should I tell him to buy the book? No, I'm just kidding.
Lewis, you can buy the book with a 15% discount by going to. That's great.
Here's one of the things I think that, he said he's buying it already. Okay, well, I'm going to give you the answer then. It's chapter 17, all about the 120 years. There are a lot of people who think that this has to do with like a countdown to the flood, that God's saying, hey, man is becoming so bad, so wicked, that I'm going to bring a flood, and it's going to happen 120 years from now. Well, the Bible doesn't mention the flood here. It's not for a little bit later. It's several verses down.
I'm going to pause you. This is what you're about to say is one of the things that I want to cover with you in one of my bad answers webinars, because there's so many. How many times have I heard what you're about to say? Well, God told Noah and he gave him 120 years to build the boat, or, things like, so go, but this is for free, one of the bad answers.
Okay. Yeah. So nothing here says that Noah started building the ark. In fact, the ark's not mentioned for another 11 verses when God said make an ark of gopher wood. That's later on in Genesis 6. But I think what he's doing right here in this passage, and if you look at the way different Bibles translate it, my spirit will not strive with man, my spirit will not remain in man, my spirit will not remain with man. There's all sorts of different interpretations as far as how to interpret the wording there. But I think what's pretty clear is that he's saying, look, man, you've been living 900 years, 969 for Methuselah. Adam was 930, 912 for Seth. And you have all these guys living over 900 years old. And God said, you know what? I ain't going to allow you to live that long, because look at how wicked you become. Therefore, I'm going to cut your days short. They're going to be 120. Well, who was the guy that wrote that passage? That's Moses. And what you see is from Noah, lives 950, Seth, 600, the next generation's in the 400s for a few generations, then it's down into the 200s, all the way till you get to a guy named Moses, the guy that wrote this. He lives 120. And then how many people after him live beyond 120? One, Jehoiada the priest. He lived to 130. And if you think about this in context, when the Israelites were first hearing this passage, because it's not as if they had Genesis with them while they were in Egypt necessarily. I know there's some views that think that maybe they had these parts, but when Moses is given when they hear what's going on Sinai, and Moses shares that, and then as they're in the wilderness wandering, as Moses is penning Genesis, as he's not penning, as he's inscribing, or however he's doing it.
I was going to say etching Genesis.
Maybe writing. I mean, maybe it's penning. But as Genesis is being written, and he's telling the people, Adam lived 930 years and he died. Seth lived 912 years and he died. Enos lived 895 years and he died. What would you be thinking if you were one of these Israelites wandering in the desert and your dad lived to like 130 or 120? And it's like, man, what happened? How come they used to live to 900 all the time? And as soon as you get to the end of the line, Lamech, Noah's father, 777. And then, you get to read later on that Noah was 950. Well, the very next passage tells you why. And that is because of this extreme wickedness that was taking place on the earth. And so man's days are going to be cut short to 120. Now, most commentators will agree on that point with what I just shared, as far as that's the interpretation of that passage. But it's very popular in Eric, in our circles, to think that that's a countdown to the flood. And you know what? It's within the realm of possibility that it's both, that God said these words 120 years before the flood happened. But this passage doesn't tell us who he said those words to. It doesn't say that Noah heard these words. It doesn't say that people heard these words at all, that there was some sort of call 120 years beforehand to repent, or, it doesn't say anything like that. Those are details that we usually add in there.
Matthew has a question, by the way. Hey, Matthew, thanks for joining me again. Hope you're doing well. Does this mean that Noah and his 3 sons were Nephilim?
If you are to believe that the Nephilim were on the earth after the flood, and if you think the Sethite view or the royalty view are true, one of those two, then yes. But I don't think they were. And I don't think that, I think one of the purposes of the flood is to make sure that none of them survived.
And
so
that
Noah
would mean
and his sons were not. And I think that
would make us offsprings of Nephilim.
Yeah, that would mean that we would have that lineage as well. And I see that as problematic because we all go back to Noah. But I think one of the points of that passage is that they're going to be wiped out. And you can see that later on too. Let me just throw this out there. I go into it in more detail in the book. But in Joshua, there are certain places where, and I see Joan talk about how Noah and his line were pure. That it says that Noah was blameless in his generations, or that has to do with being untainted, that word. But in Joshua, when they are wiping out certain places, other than the city of Jericho, as far as I can tell, the only time where God said kill them all, men, women, children, and also like the animals, it's where there were giants. Other places they were allowed to have a peace treaty with the people and people could serve them, that kind of thing. But certain places God said to kill every one of them, and it's in those places where the giants were.
We're kind of jumping right in here without kind of going strategically through these, and that's fine. I like I'm an ADD kind of guy, so I like just kind of going through this. But Lewis says, hey, I believe the Nephilim was Satan's plan to pollute the gene pool, preventing the seed of the woman from being able to crush his head, I'm sure is what he's talking about here.
Yeah, that's pretty popular for people who share the fallen angel view. A lot of people will say that that's what was going on, and that's definitely plausible. Satan can only know the future in so much as God reveals it. It's not like he knows the future unless God shares part of that plan. And so when he announces judgment on Adam and on Eve and on the serpent, and he mentioned that passage about the seed of the woman is going to crush his head. Well, maybe what he's enacting here is a way to try to make sure the seed of the woman doesn't come to being at all. So that's what some people would, how some people would interpret that. I don't know that you can prove that just because this passage doesn't say this is what they were doing, but it's reasonable, that's for sure.
It is an interesting study to go through Scripture and kind of watch how it seems like Satan is trying to destroy the seed of the woman. Cain kills Abel, and the seed goes through Seth. And just kind of over and over and over and over, you see God divinely protecting and Satan trying to kill off this seed of the woman that's going to lead to Christ. I mean, it's an interesting...
In this topic. So in Genesis 15, God tells Abram that he's going to give him and his descendants this land. He's talking about the land of Israel. Well, at that time, Abraham is in what we call Hebron. He's by the oaks of Mamre. And he said, but first they're going to go down and serve in a land that's not their own for 400 years, and then they're going to come back up here. Well, when they go down to Egypt, first of all, Abraham, then Isaac, and then Jacob all lived in Hebron. And then when they go down into Egypt and they come back up and the spies go into the land, it specifically tells us in Numbers 13 that they saw the sons of Anak in Hebron. And he even names three of them, Talmai, Shishai, and Ahiman. So it seems as if these giants are headquartered right there in Hebron, as if Satan's saying, yeah, you're not coming back here. And God's like, you want to bet? So yeah, you could see that play out even in this topic.
That's interesting, because that is interesting to me. How were they also on the earth afterwards? Maybe the Noah movie from Hollywood was correct, and Darren Aronofsky got it right. And by golly, there was a stowaway on the ark, Tim.
Well, that was Tubal Cain in the movie.
Who that was. I never saw the movie. I made a vow I said I wouldn't watch it, and so I didn't watch it.
I had to watch it twice for work, so I suffered for the rest of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I don't think the rock monsters would have been capable of doing this. That's what they have them as. So if the fallen angel view is correct, then you have Genesis 6:4 saying that the Nephilim, the giants, were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. So before the flood and after the flood, whenever the sons of God did this, meaning they did this before the flood and they did it again afterwards. The Canaanites could not do that before the flood and after the flood because the Canaanites were gone. But after the flood, this I guess you could kind of say that the royalty view could do that, but their view doesn't explain why you'd have giants produced by a man.
Just normal people that wouldn't produce these. Right. Quote, genetic or whatever kind of men of renown.
Careful with what you're going to say with giant people.
Yeah.
I get nervous around people named David. Okay, it's just I don't like it. You know?
Thank you for joining us for this engaging conversation. To view this and many more conversations in their entirety, we invite you to partner with us at creationtoday.org/partner.